listening to Go, the travel podcast. I'm Alex Walensky.
And I'm Laura Clivens.
This is the second episode in our Iceland podcast series. Today we're going to dive into Iceland's Viking history. It's a good thing to brush up on before you head over there. But before we get to that, Laura, what are some essential things that you need to know about a place before you travel there?
One thing that I do that I feel is pretty essential before I go is I read sort of like the travel safety precautions in the books that I tend to get, because I think also as a woman traveling, in some countries I feel really vulnerable as a woman, and in other countries I feel like it doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and also a good idea for all travelers to keep in mind. So you were in Colombia recently, right?
Yeah, my boyfriend and I, we went to Colombia, and it was really a great experience. It was fast. It was only about maybe a week and a half. So it's funny because I feel like I did the least amount of research that I've done probably. So for this one, we literally we thought we would just discover a lot of what we were doing on the ground. And we did. What about you, like when you went to Iceland recently?
Well, for Iceland, I did a ton of research, mostly because they have a different language than we do. But the good thing about Iceland is that almost everyone there speaks English, so you're not going to have to worry about that so much. You're also going to want to research the currency that they use over there. One of the reasons I like to do that sort of research is that so I don't get ripped off. That happened to me once. I was in Argentina, and I took a cab ride from the airport to the city center. And the taxi cab driver charged me a flat rate. And at the time, I didn't realize that it was actually 3 times the amount of a normal cab ride. I just paid the guy because I had no idea of the currency exchange. But once I lived there for a while, I realized how much I got ripped off by this cab driver, but at that point, obviously it was too late. Anyway, in Iceland, things like a bottle of water will cost you about 220 Icelandic krona, which is about $1.90. Weather is another huge player in Iceland. Even in the peak of summer, it's not going to get warm. You're not going to be walking around in flip-flops and shorts. So you're always going to want to bring a jacket or a coat with you anywhere you go. Also, the emergency number in Iceland is 112, where in the US it's 911.
I would never think ahead to do that. I would never think ahead to be like, what's their emergency number?
Yeah, I feel like that's a vital piece of information. Another thing about Iceland in the summer is that the nights never really come. It has its benefits, but also has its drawbacks. So, for example, you will always lose track of time. It'll be 11 p.m. and you'll think it's only 8 p.m. And so the restaurant or the grocery store you wanted to go to is closed, and now you're going to bed hungry.
In another sense, was it like, did it keep you in a pretty good mood? Because for me, it's like when it's light out for longer of the day in the summer, I definitely feel like it impacts my mood in a good way.
It does. No, it does help your mood at first because it's always sunny out. But for me, going to bed when it's still light outside feels like I'm wasting my day. So it's hard to get used to at first. But it can be a really, really huge benefit. So, for example, if you want to go see the geysers or some of the beautiful waterfalls when it's not crowded with people, you can go at midnight and you can still see it clear as day.
Oh, yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. I did that a lot. If you have the luxury of being able to rent your own car, I highly suggest that you do something like that. Okay, so now for this next part of our story, we're going to Iceland. We're going to visit a famous historical site where one of Iceland's most famous Vikings was born. So I'm with my wife Emily right now, and we're driving up to visit a traditional longhouse in West Iceland. I can't say what it's called because I won't pronounce it right, but it'll be on our Facebook and Instagram page. So the drive is about 2 hours north from Reykjavik. That's if you don't stop at every waterfall, glacier, mountain, goat, sheep. I'm telling you, there are so many things to stop at when you're in Iceland, you will never get anywhere on time, which is worth it because it's so beautiful out here. So we arrived to a small parking lot, and we see this small wooden door that looks like it's built into a hill. We're greeted by this guy who looks exactly like I'd imagine a Viking would look like. He's got dirty blonde hair, and he's wearing a dark blue tunic.
Take your beer with you. Finish my alcoholic beer. We call it alcoholic beer. My name is Sigurd Jökulsson.
Sigurd leads us to the doorway I saw when we first pulled up. Close up, you can see that the hill that the doorway leads into is actually a small building covered in sod or grass.
Mind the steps. It's a step down there. There you are. Okay. What the heck are we doing here?
The floor of the longhouse is just bare ground, and in the middle of the room is a narrow fire about 3 feet long, which provides most of the light in this room.
Did you notice it's much bigger on the inside than on the outside? Icelandic trolls and woo. It's Icelandic woodoos.
The ceiling is a lot higher than it looks like from the outside, and the walls are a lot wider.
What we have here is a typical Viking house, as they were 1,000 years ago. This is how we lived in the old days, guys. You sit in the middle there, and I sit in front of you in the lower place and tell you stories.
This longhouse is really cozy. And except for this fire in the middle, the longhouse from end to end is like a narrow hallway. On each side of the hallway are these elevated, squared-off bunks where you can sleep on. These bunks are about 3 feet by 3 feet, so you can't really fully lay down in any of these.
We used wood on the inside, and we used turf, sand on the outside. They were made that way, and walls were up to 120 centimeters. That was done because we wanted to preserve the heat in the houses, and this was the best building material we had.
Apparently, some Icelanders lived in homes like these well into the 1900s.
People is always wondering, why were the houses so small, and why were the beds so small, and why are we were not small. We have to remember that the word comfortable and privacy and things like that were not in the language on those days. It was have a roof over your head. That was the main mission in life.
That sounds crowded. Did you get a sense of how many people would live in one of these?
Inside a house like this, imagine yourself 25. On winter time could live up here to 25. We slept in this area, we slept by sitting up. I can sit here for hours and watch the long fire and I get very tired. You may sleep here tonight if you want to.
No, seriously, it's so comfortable.
So did you sleep there that night?
No, unfortunately we didn't. We made reservations that night. Otherwise, we would have loved to stay there. And I don't think I could sleep sitting down in one of those bunks. I've never been able to do that. Can you sleep sitting down?
Maybe on a long plane ride.
But the best part is when the wind is blowing outside, then you understand why they made this kind of houses. That was to preserve the heat, number 1, 2, and 3. It's very expensive to warm these houses up. You needed up to 25 kilos of birchwood every day to warm it up.
Wood, being the main source of fuel and building material, was an extremely valuable resource, but eventually became very scarce in Iceland. And even today, trees aren't very common in the Icelandic landscape. Anyway, this longhouse is modeled after the home of a very, very famous Icelander. But before we get into that, we're going to stop for a brief break, so stay tuned. Hey listeners, if you like this podcast so far and want to show your support, please leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you're getting your podcasts. They are really, really helpful. And don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on our latest episodes. And like us on Facebook at facebook.com/gothepodcast. And follow us on Instagram to see some really cool pictures at instagram.com/gothepodcast. Today's episode is sponsored by GoHobo.co. GoHobo is an alternative travel network built to bring you, the adventurer, affordable transportation and accommodation solutions. Need to find a couch to sleep on while you're visiting Iceland? Have you considered house sitting while you travel in Spain? What about splitting the cost of your next road trip by sharing your ride with people heading your way? GoHobo has got you covered. And check out their Wander Journal. They've got tons of articles crafted to give today's travelers tips, budget advice, and inspiring adventure stories. Join the tribe at GoHobo.co. And we're back. So where we left off, we had just mentioned that the longhouse I was in Iceland belonged to that of a very, very famous Icelander.
Inside this kind of house, Leif Eriksson was born. Leif Eriksson is the first man who came over to America from Europe.
You can't tell Leif Eriksson's story without mentioning his father, Eric the Red. And the house I'm in now is a replica of one built by Eric, who came to Iceland from Norway.
He came from Norway as a young man, married into this valley, a very beautiful girl called Þjóðhildur. Don't you like all these Icelandic names? It's like Eyjafjallajökull, as they say. And what happened is that they settled down in this little beautiful valley called Haukadalur, means Hog Valley. And they settled down here. And they made themselves a house here up in the hill. What we did is that we digged up the ruins and we made a copy of the floor. It was exactly like this.
The original house was built over 1,000 years ago, and the ruins are nearby on the same hill that this house is sitting on. It's believed that soon after Leif Eriksson was born, his father had to move the family because Eric the Red kept getting into trouble with his neighbors.
And then Eric the Red, he killed 2 people in Iceland, and then he had to move to an island off of Iceland's West Fjords, where he killed a couple of more people. and he was exiled from Iceland for 3 years.
So with nowhere to go, Eric the Red left his family behind, and instead of going back to Norway, he headed west and started the first permanent European settlement in Greenland.
Lot of food, lot of farms by the sea. So what happened is that Eric the Red stayed there for 3 years. He liked it. Went back to get his family. On the way home, he said to his crew of men, we have to give this island a good name, then people will follow us from Iceland. We shall call it Greenland. That is one of the first marketing tricks done in the sagas. A lot of people followed him. There were 26 ships who started the trip from Iceland over to Greenland.
Since Eric the Red had established the colony in Greenland, he was very well respected there. He had it pretty good. He was kind of like a nobleman. And his family also had it good. But Leif Eriksson still had ambitions of his own.
But we are talking about the year 1000. Leif Eriksson is there. Things going fine. He enjoys his life. He's a young, promising man. Wherever he came, he was everybody's favorite. That's very much Icelandic always. You know. One day he was in Norway and he heard some rumors from a man who was his friend that he once was sailing from Iceland over to Greenland. And he missed Greenland and he sailed to southwest and ended up by the coastline of Labrador 18 days later because he got a very bad wind. That is what Leif Eriksson wanted to go and find.
Labrador's on the northeastern coast of Canada.
He sailed to west with his crew of men and they discovered what is called North America. First they found Baffin Islands, sailed by the long coastline of Labrador all the way down to Newfoundland. Both these books mention that he came there. That is the area up by the St. Lawrence River, up on the way from Newfoundland up to Quebec in Canada.
It's amazing that Leif Eriksson discovered North America about 500 years before Christopher Columbus. But what are the books? What are these books that he's talking about?
He's talking about 2 books that are part of the Icelandic sagas. They were written around the turn of the 13th century in Iceland. Now, these books told stories about Eric the Red and the settlements in Greenland and the east coast of Canada. And even though they credit Leif Eriksson with making it to North America, there was never any solid proof. That's until a discovery was made of some old ruins that resembled a longhouse like the ones in Iceland.
When we discovered down in L'Anse Meadows on the north coast of Newfoundland in Canada in the year of 1961, we found the ruins of this kind of Viking house as we are in here.
It's strange to me that we still so commonly associate Christopher Columbus as like this Westerner who brought the discovery of the New World to Europe when really these Icelandic folks were there much earlier.
Yeah, centuries earlier. So now Sigurd is trying to change our understanding of Viking history.
What we did is when we discovered the ruins, we made these 3 houses to tell the story of Leif Eriksson, the first man from Europe over to America. We made them that way that we made their birthplace. We are inside that house now. We have one house in the southwest part of Greenland, and then we have one house down in L'Anse Meadows on the north coast of Newfoundland. There he settled down when he came over to America.
The ruins they found in Canada were that of a very large longhouse built by Leif Eriksson. This house was actually bigger than many they had found in Iceland.
When he made the house down in L'Anse Meadows, it's twice this house here. There was a bunch of trees there, so therefore he made the house. He left after 1 year in America to Greenland, and a lot of people moved from Greenland down to L'Anse Meadows to settle down there, and they all rented out his house. So he was the first to do this Airbnb business. That's an Icelandic idea.
So it seems like he was trying to give a little too much credit to Leif Eriksson there.
Yeah, he totally.
Anyway, so in these sagas, they mentioned Leif Eriksson and parts of Canada, right? So what are the sagas?
So the sagas don't mention anything about Airbnb, last I checked, but they do reveal a lot about what life was like back then. And to help us out with this part of the story, I spoke with Armin Jakobsen. He's a professor of medieval Icelandic literature at the University of Iceland.
Hello. These are big questions. So I could easily talk for saga writing starts in the late 13th century and goes on into the 15th century. So you can't really say this is history or fiction. They are simply less reliable as history.
They aren't as reliable as history because there's a lot of mythology and folklore in them. But they do have a lot of reliable facts like the location of their stories, which mention Greenland and Canada. To put that into perspective, in America, we have tales from Hans Christian Andersen, but we know they're just tales, and they don't really have that much historical significance regarding the birth of America as a nation. But imagine if you mix the story of the American Revolution with Hans Christian Andersen tales, and now you're left with a mix of fact and folklore. That's kind of like how the sagas are to the history of Iceland.
We're still reading the sagas not as literature, but as tales from the past. I'm writing about the troll concept. Today, the troll is regarded as a race or a species, but this is post-medieval thinking. The two main trolls in the Middle Ages are the witch and the zombie, but there are also other magical creatures that are referred to as a troll.
He said today the troll is regarded as a race or a species. What does he mean?
So what he means is that people today consider trolls to be a species, and since other magical creatures are considered trolls, that also includes elves. And believe it or not, some Icelanders today are working on actively preserving elf habitats.
Elves and fairies are the subjects of lectures.
The road will run through a lava field where elves are believed to live.
They are the hidden folks, trolls, elves.
Building projects are sometimes altered so as not to disturb them.
Iceland's elves exist.
This belief is so strong in Icelandic culture that many roads and building projects have been altered to avoid damaging elf homes.
Wait, what? So did you see any trolls or elves when you were in Iceland?
No, I wasn't lucky enough to see any, but what I did see was these painted doorways that you can see all across Iceland, and people paint these on boulders and rocks to signify that an elf or an elf family lives there.
What? I want to see one. I want to see one of those.
Well, we've got some pictures of elf houses on our Facebook and Instagram page. And to our listeners who may have seen some elves, maybe have some elf stories, send them to us. We want to hear what you got. You can find us on facebook.com/gothepodcast or email us at contact@gothepodcast.com. And don't forget to subscribe to us on iTunes. And that's the end of this podcast episode. If you'd like to find out more about the longhouses in Iceland, we'll have those links up on our Facebook page so that the next time you go to Iceland, you can check them out.
I'm Laura Clivens, and you're listening to Go, the Travel Podcast.
And I'm Alex Walensky.
Leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, and let us know what you think.
And thanks for listening.